Hello and welcome to the fourth episode of the second season of Unlimited Opinions. I'm Adam Bishop.
I'm Mark Bishop.
And as always, we're reading Jake Jackson's Myths and Legends. And today we are starting on the Celtic stories in this book. And of course, this book covers world mythologies from all over the world. So stay tuned to hear your favorite regional mythologies later in the season. There you go. Just a little something to keep people listening.
Well, we all have our favorites.
Yes.
Well, only the people who listen to this podcast have their favorites. But
yeah, I'm assuming the people who are listening to Mythology Podcast probably have a favorite mythology.
I don't.
You don't? You don't have a favorite mythology at all?
I don't think so.
Huh.
What are my options?
Well, I mean, we're reading a book whose table of contents is split up by region, so I feel like...
So far, I like the Celtic.
Well, that is just between Celtic and African, so not too wide of a range of... Yeah.
Although I'm reconsidering my poor opinions of the African tales because I'm thinking back on them. I'm thinking they're maybe a little bit more complex than I give them credit for.
Maybe. Well, too late. Your opinions are out there with the first 3 episodes, so no redoing those. In this episode...
I have plenty of opinions. I have unlimited opinions.
We do have unlimited opinions, but unfortunately...
And when you have unlimited opinions, you necessarily have some contradictory opinions. Oh, I just dropped something.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'm sure that sounds lovely for the recording.
Our listeners could be offended by that.
Yes. So this episode is about the invasion cycle, tales of the Tuatha Danann and the early Milesians in the Celtic region of mythology. So I guess we should start with this very long story of the quest of the Children of Tuirenn. And I'm very sorry if I butcher any of these Celtic names. Celtic languages are notoriously hard to pronounce. The orthography does not make much sense. So... I've tried my best. Yes, orthography. Like how words are written. How they're spelled. Yes.
I learned a new word today.
There you go. Congratulations. So, the quest of the Children of Tuirenn. I have a lot of notes on this story. Very compact in details. So, Tuatha...
I can tell the whole story very briefly.
I think we could wait for your summary afterwards.
Okay.
Don't want to spoil it.
Okay.
So Tuatha of the Silver Hand was king of the Tuatha Danann. The Tuatha Danann are a group of people very, very important in Celtic mythology. And he was king during the savage days of the Fomorian invasions. And Balor of the Evil Eye, the leader of the Fomorians, had forced the Tuatha Danann to pay an annual tax on the hill of Wisneach. So the misery of these times became known to many people, in particular Lugh of the Long Arm of the Fairy Mounds, who was son of Cian, son of Canta. And Lugh was one of the most fearless warriors, and he was so revered by the people of Fairyland that he was given all of the gifts of Manannan, the sea god, Anbar, a horse whose rider was never injured, the boat of Manannan, which could read thoughts and travel wherever its keeper demanded, Manannan's unpierceable armor, and the sword of the Retaliator, which could cut through any shield.
I like that name, the Retaliator.
Yeah, it's a good name for a sword. Very good sword name.
It's a good name for a superhero. Kind of like the Punisher.
Yes.
Should be like the Punisher's stepbrother.
Would that be your superhero name, the Retaliator?
I don't know. Something like that. Then.
Yeah.
Something about revenge or something.
Yeah, that suits you. And so
Captain
Lugh...
Vengeance.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Dad.
With the sword of justice.
Very
a shield of something, I don't know.
Very noble.
Shield of spite.
That's on par. That's exactly what you would have. You would have a shield of spite. And so Lugh came to the hill of Wisneach, the day of the annual tax, and he saw the pitiful state that the Tuatha De Danann are in. And so he came up to the Fomorians and slaughtered all but one of their tax collectors. And he looked at this one tax collector and he told him to report to Balor that Lugh of the Long Arm is willing to fight him to protect the Tuatha De Danann. And so Lugh began organizing a great army, and he soon heard of Balor plundering the lands to the northwest. And so Lugh rode across the plains of Erin, which is the broad area that all these stories are set in, to seek the aid of his father Cian, who controlled all the armies of the Fairy Mounds. And so Cian and his brother Cu and Cethan set off in different directions after they heard from Lugh to round up all of the warriors of Fairyland. So Cian journeyed northwards to Mag Wirthemna, where he saw 3 men, Brian, Iucharba, and Iuchar, the sons of Tuirenn, and they were bitter rivals of the sons of Canta. So not wanting to fight, Cian struck himself with a druidic wand and turned into a pig, hiding among a herd of swine nearby. Brian saw this happen, and so he struck Iuchar and Iucharba with his own wand, changing them into hounds that chased down the enchanted pig by scent. So once they cornered this pig, Brian cast his spear at Cian the pig, who then pleaded to be turned back into human to at least die a dignified death. So Brian did so, and Cian proclaimed that he had been tricked, as he will now be punished not for killing a pig, but for killing a man with a weapon. And so the sons of Tuirenn then decided that they would get out of this punishment in a way by not killing him with a weapon and instead stoned Cian to death. And so they laid him in an unmarked grave and then ran off to join the war against the Fomorians. So with the armies of Fairyland and the Tuatha Danann, Lugh soon won battle after battle against Balor, causing the Fomorians to flee for a long time. So many festivities were had, but after a while, Lugh began to grow anxious, as he had not had any news of Cian, his father. So Lugh rode Anbar the horse to Mag Moratemna, where the stones began to cry out about how Cian was tragically murdered by the sons of Tuirenn. And so Lugh reburied his father in a proper grave and returned to Tara, where the celebrations were taking place. He sat calmly next to King Tuatha during the banquet, and soon called everyone there to attention. As everyone was silent, he asked everyone what the punishment should be for the murders of his father. And while asking all of these questions, he stared right at the sons of Tuirenn, who bowed their heads in shame, realizing that they were found out, and they waited for the sentence. So Lugh demanded 8 things: 3 ripened apples, the skin of a pig, a pointed spear, 2 steeds in a chariot, 7 pigs, a whelping pup, a cooking spit, and 3 shouts on a hill. And so he asked the sons of Tuirenn if this was a fair punishment, and they all agreed that this was fair, but then Lugh revealed that he had tricked them. And so there's a long description that I'm going to read here of what he was really asking for. The apples I have requested of you, Lugh continued, are the 3 apples of the Hesperides growing in the gardens of the eastern world. They are the color of burnished gold and have the power to cure the bloodiest wound or the most horrifying illness. To retrieve these apples, you will need great courage, for the people of the East have been forewarned that 3 young warriors will one day attempt to deprive them of their most cherished possessions. And the pig's skin I have asked you to bring me will not be easy to obtain either, for it belongs to the king of Greece, who values it above everything else. It too has the power to heal all wounds and diseases. The spear I have demanded of you is the poisoned spear kept by Pisar, king of Persia. The spear is so keen to do battle that its blade must always be kept in a cauldron of freezing water to prevent its fiery heat melting the city in which it is kept. And do you know who keeps the chariot and the 2 steeds I wish to receive from you? Lugh continued. We do not know, answered the sons of Tuirenn. They belong to Dobar, king of Sicily, said Lugh, and such is their unique charm that they are equally happy to ride over sea or land, and the chariot they pull is unrivaled in beauty and strength. And the 7 pigs you must gather together are the pigs of Asal, king of the golden pillars. Every night they are slaughtered, but every morning they are found alive again, and any person who eats part of them is protected from ill health for the rest of his life. 3 further things I've demanded of you, Lugh went on. The whelping hound you must bring me guards the palace of the king of Iruad. Philanus is her name, and all the wild beasts of the world fall down in terror before her, for she is stronger and more splendid than any other creature known to man. The cooking spit I have called for is housed in the kitchen of the fairy woman on Innis Vincurie, an island surrounded by the most perilous waters that no man has ever safely reached. Finally, you must give the 3 shouts requested of you on the hill of Midcan, where it is prohibited for any man other than the sons of Midcan to cry aloud. It was here that my father received his warrior training, and here that his death will be hardest felt. Even if I should one day forgive you of my father's murder, it is certain that the sons of Midcan will not. That sounds achievable, doesn't it?
It's a lot of very difficult quests.
Yes, very, very difficult. And so,
if I knew you were going to read the entire chapter, I wouldn't have read it before.
Well, that's not the entire chapter. This is a long section, but that was the most succinct way, I think, to get the point across, was just to read what was written.
Then wait till I tell you what it is.
Oh, yeah. The sons of Tuirenn were terrified of this and went to their father, who told them that they must pay what Lugh asks, but they at least ought to ask for the boat of Manannan, which Lugh graciously gave them so that they could travel the world. The 3 came first to the Hesperides, where they turned themselves into hawks and flew into the tree, snatching the golden apples. The daughters of the king of the Hesperides turned themselves into ospreys, pursuing them until they tired, and so the 3 escaped with the apples. Brian then proposed they go to Greece in the guise of 3 bards of Erin to find the skin of the pig. They arrived at the court of King Tuis, who was impressed with their poetry, and so they asked for the pig skin as payment. King Tuis did not agree, but said he would pay them in 3 times the amount of gold that could fit in the skin. So while he was measuring the gold, Brian snatched the skin and killed the king, and the sons of Tuirenn traveled to Persia and to the court of King Pisar for the magic spear. Again they posed as poets and asked for the spear as payment, and King Pisar refused, at which Brian flung a golden apple at King Pisar's head, killing him instantly, and they seized the spear and ran. They traveled.
It crushed his skull.
Yeah, it scattered his brains, I think is what it read as. And so they traveled to the kingdom of Dobar in Sicily, and so they were hoping to make friendship with the king for the famous chariot. So they served King Domar for a month and a half as very loyal and very brave soldiers, and after a while they asked to see the famous chariot, which the king allowed. The sons of Tuirenn then fought the guards and stole the chariot, traveling then to King Assal of the Pillars of Gold. By this time, news of their exploits had been heard all over the world, and King Assal had known of the three brothers, and so he wisely handed over the 7 pigs peacefully. And so the sons of Tuirenn pledged their service to him, and Assal then joined them to the king of Iuchar, for his daughter was married to him, and he hoped to persuade him to give up his hound. King Iuchar refused to give up his hound, and so after a brief fight, Brian bound him and gave him to King Assal, after which he relinquished the hound, but he did not kill King Iuchar. Back in Erin, Balor of the Evil Eye was preparing to attack again, and Lugh wanted his magical items so that he could defend against this threat, and so he cast a druidical spell on the sons of Tuirenn, causing them to forget their remaining 2 tasks. They returned and rejoiced, happy to be done with their quest, but Lugh pointed out that they still had 2 tasks remaining, and so they left behind their treasures and went on their way to find these last 2 items. They embarked again, struggling to find the hidden island of Innisfin Curie. Brian then swam 2 whole weeks underwater, finally finding the mysterious island underneath the water, where many women gathered around the magic cooking spit that he needed. They humiliated him, saying that they could have easily killed him, but they gave him the spit for his heroism for coming all the way down to the depths of the ocean. The 3 brothers then came to the hill of Midcan to give 3 shouts, but Midcan himself confronted them, saying no one was allowed to shout there. Brian then thrust his sword through Midcan's heart, and Midcan's sons arrived and caused the bloodiest and most bitter fight ever, but eventually the sons of Tuirenn were victorious, but they all had mortal wounds. They barely made it to the house of their father Tuirenn, telling him to run to Lugh and ask for the magic pinskin to heal them. Lugh then refused, saying that he would rather give the expense of the earth in gold than hand over any object that would save the lives of Tuirenn's sons. He said to let them die in the knowledge that they have achieved something good because of me, and let them thank me for bringing them renown and glory through such a valorous death. Tuirenn hung his head in defeat and his heart broken too, and so he returned to where his 3 sons were lying, and he died in grief over the bodies of Brian, Iucharba, and Iuchar. And so the story of the sons of Tuirenn was then known as one of the 3 sorrows of storytelling. So what's your more succinct version? Because that was the whole story.
Yeah, so 3 guys murdered the king's son. So as punishment, the king ordered them to do a number of impossible tasks, which they ended up completing through a lot of murder and treachery, ultimately suffering mortal wounds. And when they asked for ultimate forgiveness and the healing items that they had retrieved for the king denied it and said, you're lucky that I sent you on these possible journeys, because now you have died an honorable death after achieving world renown for your bravery and treachery.
Yes.
Isn't that pretty much what it is?
Much more succinct, but not as fun. You don't get all the fun Celtic names.
I did like that quote. You read it, for the king.
Mm-hmm.
Let them die in the knowledge that they have achieved something good because of me.
Yes.
Let them thank me for bringing them renown and glory through such a valorous death.
Mm-hmm.
He's telling this guy, hey, yeah, sure, I could save your 3 sons with very little inconvenience to me, but really you should be thanking me because I caused them to be dying with great valor.
Yes. If you were Lugh, would you have saved these three sons, or would you have let them die like he did?
That's tough.
Yeah.
That's tough, because they just murdered his dad.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't even really any good reason for it. I
Yeah.
guess other than there was always like some sort of feud between the 2 clans, I guess.
I mean, I'd feel like those 3 are people that you kind of want to have on your side, though. Like, I mean, they just traveled around the entire world, killing and stealing basically every single magical object there is. So I feel like they'd be pretty useful to have on your side.
Well, I don't think you could trust them, though.
That's true.
If you let them off the hook, they didn't earn. I mean, in a sense, they kind of earned those items, but mostly it was that they tricked these people, murdered them. You got access to the items through deception or some sort of ruse, and then they just slaughtered the people that presumably rightfully owned them, and then brought them back. And it just seemed like it probably should have I guess if he was going to execute them, he should have just been off with their heads that night when they're at the big banquet.
Yeah.
Because well, the punishments were suggested. He asked the crowd, how should the murders of my fathers be punished? And the head of the table or whatever, I forget that guy's name was. We won't just kill them. Isn't this the one where he said he would drag out their deaths indefinitely and cut off one arm each day or something? And so he would have appeared magnanimous if he would have just said, let's just chop off their heads and be done with it.
Yeah.
Instead, he sends them on all the stuff, and then ultimately they're slowly dying anyway after achieving all these things. And he still just says, nah, you're going to die.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's fascinating, just how far they traveled the world, especially when you kind of look at the Celtic world is very secluded in relation to the rest of Europe, and especially they have them like basically going all the way to the Mediterranean in this story. So it kind of makes you wonder, how much these Celtic people really knew about the rest of the world, because clearly they knew quite a lot to, of Persia and know of all these other kings who are presumably at least somewhat based on historical figures. That's kind of what you see in these myths, is that usually these named characters are based on somebody real. So it does kind of beg the question just how widely traveled the Celtic people really were. It's very fascinating.
Right, yeah. Or at least they were getting information. People were traveling to them, at the very least, with information and stories and their interest in it. Yeah, I was surprised by those references to other lands, and that it played such a prominent role in this kind of mythology story.
You kind of think of these.
It's a good story. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, you kind of think of these Celtic stories as really, just secluded off in Ireland mostly, but the Celtic people were pretty widespread. They were all over the island of England, but they were also on the west coast of France initially. Right. They were pretty widespread throughout all of southern Europe for a long time, but gradually they were just pushed farther and farther west. And so that's kind of how they ended up in Ireland finally. So it's interesting to see how far they really did travel.
And ultimately, our ancestors we have family that on my side of the family is from Ireland.
Yes, that's true. That's true. Maybe your great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather was Lugh of the Long Arm.
Or it could have been one of those three brothers that got killed.
That's true. That's true. Could be Brian. One of those names is really not like the other. Iucharba, Iuchar, and Brian.
Yeah.
It's very
Doug.
Yeah, Doug. The next story is the tragedy of the Children of Lir. So during the Battle of Tail Tui, the Tuatha Danann were slain in large numbers by the invading Gaelic Milesians. So Erin, the kingdom of Erin, was split into two kingdoms, and the Tuatha Danann were banished underground. But the Danann gods made them an impressive underground city where time had no meaning, and those who lived there remained immortal. And so the people of Dana, or the Tuatha Danann, then chose a king. They chose Bodb the Red, son of Dagda, the Lord of Perfect Knowledge, instead of Lir, who was the father of Manannan, the sea god. And so Lir was very angry at not being picked to be the king. So he retreated to his home at Seath Fionnachaith. After some time, Lir's wife died, and Bodb sent a very compassionate message to him, inviting him to a banquet at Bodb's house at Loch Dearg. And so Lir essentially forgave Bodb, for this wonderful display of compassion, and came to the banquet. And while he was there, Bodb offered Lir any of his 3 daughters as a wife. And so Lir chose Ab, the eldest and wisest daughter. Lir and Ab had 2 sets of twins, Ad and Fionnghuala, and Fiachra and Con. Ab then sadly died during the second childbirth, and Bodb then graciously offered his other daughter for marriage. And so Lir then chose Aoife. Aoife then began to grow jealous of the love that Lir constantly showed for his children, and so Aoife was thinking that her husband just did not love her at all and plotted to just be rid of the children entirely. So she
Typical evil stepmother.
Yes, very, very typical evil stepmother. And so she began to feign an illness, and she laid in bed for an entire year, and then summoned a druid to help her in her scheme. So one day she rose from her bed and said she'd like to take the children to see their grandfather Bodb. When they had traveled a while in this cart, Aoife then ordered a servant to just kill the children outright, but of course the servant refused because that's insane. And so she then tried to just kill these children herself, but sympathy held her back. And so, unable to kill them outright, she struck them with a druid's wand, turning them into swans, saying, Here on Darebak's lonely wave, for years to come your watery home, not Lir nor Druid can now ye save from endless wandering on the lonely foam. And so these children were cursed to turn into 4 swans, and Fionnghuala the daughter spoke for her 3 brothers, asking why Aoife had done this. And so Aoife, hearing this child's voice come from the swan, she was filled with sympathy, and so she fixed a term for the curse to be lifted, saying that you will remain in the form of 4 white swans until a woman from the south shall be joined in marriage to a man from the north. Until the light of...
I was thinking like that would happen in 5 years.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
I started being like, oh no, it took a turn.
And until the light of Christianity shines on Erin. For 300 years...
Maybe it's a couple summers after that.
A couple summers. For 300 years, you'll be doomed to live on Loch Derbrach, and followed by 300 years on the raging sea of Moyle, and a further 300 years on Yoros Damnan.
Yikes.
I grant you the power of speech and the gift of singing, and no music in the world shall sound more beautiful and pleasing to the ear than that which you shall make.
At that point, the servant is like, man, I should have just killed him.
A fate worse than death. Yeah.
Yeah, 1,000 years as a swan on the stupid lakes. God. Going on, moving along.
And so Lir, realizing that his child never reached Bodom, began to look for them, and he eventually came to the lake and found the swans, realizing that they were his children. And so these 4 swans lived with the people of Dana for 300 years, and then came the time for them to move to the Sea of Moyle. They lasted the cold storms and biting winds of Moyle for 300 years, and their courage was restored one day as they were beginning to lose hope, when Fergus and Ad, son of Bodom the Red, visited them, inspiring them with hope to return to their families eventually. They then stayed an even rougher 300 years in Yoros Damnan, and when that time passed, they rejoiced, excited to finally be heading home to their father Lir. They flew to Seath Fionnachaidh, but to their despair, the castle had crumbled, and its people were long gone, and everything was overgrown with grass. The children of Lir then stayed at Innis Glaura, a beautiful lake nearby, when a missionary named Chaimor saw them and brought them to his house and cared for them for a while, making them forget all their sorrows. There with Chaimor they learned prayers and devotions to the one true God, as Chaimor was a Christian missionary. A couple who were children of kings from the north and from the south then passed by, hearing of the beautiful swans, and wished for them to be their wedding gift. To their surprise, as soon as they were married, the swans turned into 3 old men and an old woman, as the curse was lifted with the marriage from the north and the south, and the Christianity coming to Erin. These 4 then called for Chaimor to baptize them, and then they died peacefully and happily, rejoicing in the one true Lord. So it's a Catholic tale in the end, I suppose.
Yes, all of a sudden, now we're rejoicing. We got rescued by this monk, and then we died as shriveled old people, having only been human for another 5 minutes after 1,000 years of suffering.
Yeah, that's a bit rough. Yeah, we lasted 900 years on all of these terrible lakes, and then we tried to come home and realized everybody that we loved was long dead, but at least we get to go to this chapel with this monk.
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal.
I'm seeing the themes which I expected from Irish lore, is that long suffering, long-term suffering, tales of woe and insurmountable agony and misery over long periods of time.
Lots of time spent on very cold bodies of water. It's a recurring theme.
Both stories is what I'm saying, because even the other guys had to do one thing after another after another. And kind of a similar thing of this. It's like, oh my gosh. Yeah,
it always just seems like never-ending tasks. Is you just have to go a little while longer to get to the end. It's just constant hindrances once you finally get to where you think you need to be.
And then the only positive ending is the sweet release of death.
Yes,
in both of them.
Yes, that's true.
They're long-suffering people as Celts.
It's sometimes also, I've noticed, kind of hard to tell who the actual protagonist is. Right. Especially in that first story, it starts out, with 3 different people until it finally gets to the Sons of Tuirenn. And it's just kind of where are we focusing on here? There's so much backstory and so much history crammed into these stories. They're trying to combine as much as possible into one tale. It's fascinating. Right.
Reminds me of that Norm Macdonald joke about the moth that goes in to see the doctor.
Yes, I've seen that.
It goes on and on and on, and then the punchline is a left turn, which I'll. Yes. If our listeners interested, Google Norm Macdonald. What's the Oh, what's that redheaded comedian's name that had a talk show?
Oh, I don't. Oh, Conan O'Brien.
Conan O'Brien, yeah.
Yeah.
Norm Macdonald, Conan O'Brien, Moss Story.
There's another joke that he told with Conan O'Brien. That's a similar theme. It's about one of his uncles that was a miner and had a very terrible life and had to go live with a group of people.
I don't know if I know that one.
Oh, it's not child friendly. I can tell you that much.
Okay.
Yes.
I guess I'll have to Google that after the podcast.
Yes. So, but yeah, Norm Macdonald, great comedian.
Was
a great comedian. That's it's sad. The next story, after that sad note.
He was Catholic, by the way.
Was he? I didn't know that.
Yes.
Well, I guess I could have figured with the Mick.
What do you mean by that?
It's an Irish name.
You bigot.
Yes, I'm so sorry. The next story,
you're part Irish, so
yes,
you're exempt.
Yeah, so we're good.
Is that how it works?
Yeah, I think that's how it works. I think we're good. I think we're safe. The next story, the last one in this section, is the Wooing of Etain. So Mithir the Proud.
This is a wild one. I didn't see this one developing as it did.
Yeah, this one was a lot of different things.
Yeah,
that's I think that's the best way to describe it.
Very creative. I was interested all the way through.
Yes. So there's a man named Mithir the Proud who was king of the fairy people at the time, and he had a wife named Fuan Mach. And so they lived in the hollow hills of Bree Lyth. So one day as he was walking around, he stumbled across a beautiful maiden named Etain, and he asked for her hand in marriage, forgetting all about Fuamnach. So Fuamnach, very upset, seeing that her husband had just taken this other woman and believing that she was no longer loved, sought the help of the druid Brussel. And they turned Etain into a butterfly, and the winds carried her out a window, and she was just lost to the winds for 7 whole years, becoming increasingly tattered and worn. Etain then somehow managed to come to the palace of Angus Og, who was the Danann god of love. And so he was able to lessen the curse, so she was human from dusk to dawn, but then returned back into her butterfly form once the sun rose.
And he planted some bushes for her and stuff. It was nice.
That was nice. And so Etain and Angus Og loved each other for some time. However, Fuamnach came to know Etain's refuge with Angus Og and came to the palace as a raven. And so she snatched the butterfly and cast her into a tempest once again. And so after a while of being thrown about, Etain was thrown into the castle of the Ulster chieftain Etar and landed on his wife's goblet. And so as she tried to get a drink from this goblet, she landed on the rim and was mistakenly swallowed by Etar's wife. But the gods then saved Etain from dying, and she kept her in Etar's wife's womb, and then she was born again in 9 months, remembering nothing of her past life.
I did not see that coming.
Yeah, this was a twist that she's just reincarnated, and then her new parents then named her Etain once more. She grew up to be a beautiful maiden, and a warrior named Iuchar became king of Erin. The king then realized he needed a wife to be actually respected as a king, which is a very strange reason for wanting a wife. It's because he wanted to host a banquet, but nobody would show up because he did not have a queen, which is very strange. And so he found Etain, and they were quickly married. And so on the wedding day, Etain was ready to meet Eochaid's guests when a fair warrior dressed in purple came to the palace. This warrior was Mithir the Proud, and recognizing Etain, he asked her to return to him. But because she did not recognize him, she refused, and Mithir left, utterly defeated. For months, Etain was haunted by dreams of this strange man in purple, but she dared not confide in her husband, fearing what he would say about this. One summer morning, Mithir returned and challenged Eochaid to a game of chess, as he was a renowned chess player. Also something I did not expect, a riveting game of chess in the story. Eochaid easily won 2 games, as Mithir played purposely poorly to let his guard down. But before
the same thing happened in a Fresh Prince of Bel-Air episode.
Really?
But it was Poole, and it was Uncle... what's the uncle's name? The character's name?
Oh, I should know this. Prince's... Yeah, Uncle...
Anyway, his uncle didn't have to, but decided to win back some money that Will Smith's character, Fresh Prince, had lost to some pool sharks, and acted like he couldn't play, and then raised the stakes, and then pulled out his personal pool cue, and got all the money back.
Yes, that makes sense.
So maybe he was inspired by this story.
Maybe the writers of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Uncle Phil, that's right. Maybe the writers of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air were really into Celtic mythology. I think that's the only logical explanation we can come to.
I see some themes that remind me of Tolkien.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can get into that after the story. Yeah, but yeah, definitely.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
All right.
And so before the third game, Mithier then asked for a bet. Essentially, he said that if he won, he would get a kiss from Etain as a reward. And Eochaid agreed, believing that he would have a very easy victory. Mithier then won, and Eochaid asked for a month to reconcile this decision. And so in a month, Eochaid had seemed to have forgotten about this deal and was holding a feast when Mithier returned looking even more resplendent than ever. And he came up to Etain and kissed her, causing her to remember all of her love for him. And as they kissed, they were enveloped in mist and were lifted gracefully into the night. So Eochaid ran after them, but all he could see were 2 white swans in the sky. And so he swore that every fairy mound in the country would be destroyed until he could find Mithier the Proud. But I'm assuming he never did, because that is where the story ends, unfortunately for Eochaid. But fortunately
I kind of
for
feel
Mithier.
bad for that guy, except for that he should never have bet his wife's kiss. He did commit that sin of arrogance. But otherwise, I kind of feel bad for the guy. Here he is, he's devoted to his wife and doesn't know she's a reincarnated butterfly. And then he loses her.
Well, it's interesting to think about who's really the protagonist here, because Mithier, in the first place, just left his wife for some beautiful girl he found, which caused her to curse the new girl, which, I mean, it's kind of understandable. I mean, I guess that's what you did back in Celtic times, is curse people if they made you angry.
What else are you going to do?
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, can't exactly watch TV.
Take away your potatoes?
Yeah. Too soon.
Although I guess potatoes
potatoes,
came
that would have been, from America. Yeah. Fun fact, potatoes were native to America. But yeah, I guess it's interesting that, who's actually in the right here.
He was the bad guy because he just left he met this really beautiful gal and just left his first wife.
Mm-hmm.
Then she gets cursed by the first wife and, little butterfly story and all that kind of stuff. But the more recent king seems like a much better person. Mm-hmm. He shouldn't have bet one kiss, but he's probably what's one kiss?
Well, it's interesting. The little scene with Angus Og is interesting too, because Etain then kind of just forgets about her first husband then too, because she kind of falls in love with Angus Og for a while. So it's like nobody's kind of free of sin in this story. It's all they're just kind of going around and doing whatever they please, really.
Right.
It's strange.
Whatever the mood hits them.
Yeah, very strange. But yeah, you were saying parallels in Tolkien.
Yes.
Of course, if you're new listeners to this podcast, this is one of my all-time favorite things is talking about Tolkien. But yeah.
But we did not discuss Tolkien as it applied to the African stories too much, did we?
No, there wouldn't have been too much, African influence on Tolkien's mythology.
No, but we probably could have worked into the conversation.
I'm sure we could have. Well, I can work Tolkien into anything. Yeah, but Tolkien was very well versed in Celtic mythology. He really, really loved Celtic mythology. What he wanted to do, kind of initially as he was setting out writing, the Silmarillion and Lord of the Rings and all those sorts of things, is his original frame of mind, and this changed after a while, was he wanted to write a mythology that was unique to England, because England doesn't really have its own mythology. The myths that we associate with England, like King Arthur, those are Celtic myths. Those are Celtic stories originally. And so he wanted to write his own really pure, I guess, pure in quotation marks, English mythology that would be, unique to the country. And so that's
maybe you should write American myths.
American myths.
We have patriotic stories, but we don't have myths unless you count the Mormons.
Quick jab at all our Mormon listeners. Wow.
Well, they have that whole Smith thing, and the book of the Bible and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's true.
So, and they had their views. I don't know, really well versed in it, but that somehow the kingdom of God moved to Indiana. I think wasn't it from the people? The Israelites were transported to the United States years and years ago. I don't know if you're familiar with that story. I'm not really strong on it, but and then left the tablets for him to discover in the United States, I think.
Yeah, I do not know. I'm not familiar with the Book of Mormon at all.
Well, you should not check it out. It's a waste of time.
Another jab at our Mormon listeners. Maybe they can tweet at us at capital U, lowercase LMTD, opinions at the capital O, to let us know that they're very disappointed in us dissing their religion.
I don't know, really. I don't think I'm saying anything
Yeah.
they would disagree with.
Well, back to Tolkien, because I did want to talk about that a little bit.
Yes, I'm sorry, I
Yes.
interrupted.
No, that's perfectly fine. That was a complete tangent. But yeah, that sort of theme of impossible tasks is very common, as you've seen in Celtic mythology, and that's one of the core themes of one of Tolkien's major stories. You're not familiar with it, I don't think, but it's the story of Beren and Luthien. And so this
What? Of course I know about Beren and Luthien.
Oh, of course, yeah.
I'm being sarcastic. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, this is
But
another.
I like what was it? What was the name of that bear creature?
Beorn.
Beorn.
Which
I
is,
like that dude. That was a good character.
Yeah, which is just about
That and Tom Riddle. I think
nope.
Tom Riddle.
Tom Riddle is Voldemort. You're thinking of Tom Bombadil.
Oh, yeah. It's fun.
Yes, that's Tom Riddle's from
It's
Harry
like
Potter.
saying "Beam me up, Scotty" to a Star Wars fan.
Yeah, that's exactly what that is.
Sorry.
Ouch. Yeah, but that sort of theme of impossible tasks is Beren and Luthien. Beren was a man and Luthien was a woman. Luthien was an elf. Sorry, Beren was a human, and so he wanted to marry Luthien, and her father was like, "No, unless you can bring me a Silmaril," which was one of these very fancy jewels that only the really evil Dark Lord had. And so they go on this quest to retrieve the Silmarils, but as they're coming back, everything kind of goes wrong for them, as we kind of see in these Celtic stories. Just when they think they're safe, something bad happens and things go awry, and they only ever get their happy ending through very roundabout means of kind of acquiring that. So it's very interesting. I think that's very close parallel to a Celtic myth. There is definitely the story of Beren and Luthien, which you should absolutely read if you have time.
No.
It's sitting in my room. It's a book. It's right up there. You can check that out
I
anytime
can't
you
find
want.
it. I don't know.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
I've looked really long and hard
Yeah,
for
I'm
it.
sure you have.
It was a quest.
Yeah.
It's a quest I failed.
Well, another interesting note about Celtic things related to Tolkien is that one of Tolkien's invented languages, Sindarin, was very heavily based on Welsh, one of the Celtic languages, because Tolkien, when he was a child, he would see like boxcars passing his house, and they'd have Welsh words on them, and he was just like so enamored with this, language that seems so mysterious and that sort of thing that he, devoted basically the rest of his life to studying languages. That's kind of where it started for him, which is very interesting, I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know. Are you much of a writer, though?
Me?
Can you write a mythology? Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure I could. Yeah, I like to write.
Huh.
Yeah.
I know you like to read. I didn't know you like to write,
Yeah.
like creative writing.
Yeah. I like creative writing more than any other type of writing, that's for sure.
We should co-author a mythology series.
You think so?
Yes. I think I could think of some twists and turns.
Would it be like based on a real mythology, or are we creating our own mythology from scratch?
Well, of course we create it from
Oh,
scratch.
I'm so sorry to have assumed anything less.
Why would we base it on something?
Well, I don't
Just
know.
something-
That's what like a lot of the mythological stories are now. Is what if the Greek gods still existed? What if that's sort of the
based on
Percy
that.
Jackson take? Yeah,
Star Trek's even done that.
yeah. That's true. That is very true. What would
Star
our
Trek's done it.
yes? What would our mythology be based around? What's the core value?
I don't know.
No, okay. I
You're
thought
the
you were
lead
brimming. I thought you
creator.
were brimming with ideas for this.
No, I have no ideas to brim.
I don't think that's the expression, unfortunately.
No, I was just going to give color commentary.
Oh,
I'm just going
okay.
to clean it up a little bit. Like you do all the big stuff and the
Yeah.
hard work, and then I'll say, "Well, yeah, it sounds pretty good, but what about something else?"
Yeah, that sounds about right. That sounds perfectly on par.
The least effort from me would be
Oh yeah,
I'm looking for.
yes, of course.
But I want half the profits.
Of course you do. How could I expect anything else?
But yeah, what did you think of these stories generally?
I really like these stories. These were very fascinating to me. They were very, fantasy-esque. And I could talk all about, the idea of fairy in these stories, because Tolkien, of course, had an essay on fairy stories. But yeah, it's very, very fascinating. I think that concept that we especially see in Celtic myths about the notion of fairy. Which
Why do you think they're so enamored with fairies and like underground kingdoms and stuff?
Well, it's not so much like fairies like we would think of.
Excuse me.
Yeah, it's not so much fairies that we would think of as, little flying things with wings. Fairy was more of just the unknown. Magic as a whole, what's just beyond the edge of the woods, what's within this circle of trees, that sort of thing. Because the Celtic people were very focused on nature. That's where, the idea of the druid comes from. They were mentioned several times as they were, priests, but they were more so devoted to nature.
Weren't they originally like animists? I believe that like the animals and plants and streams and stuff had spirits
Yes, I believe so.
or souls or whatever you want to call it.
And so where you kind of get that like idea of fairy, you kind of still do get that in like fantasy is, just like imagining what could be and, the power that fairy stories have as kind of this form of escapism of, creating a better, world that hasn't been completely explored yet. 'Cause it's really all about mystery is what it's really about.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
What are those? What's that series of books, young adult books that the fairy realm? Was it Rick Riordan or is it one of the other ones?
Well, Rick Riordan was all of the Percy Jackson.
No, it wasn't Percy Jackson. Was he one of the ones
written by Artemis Fowl. That's what you're thinking of, right? Yeah.
Yes. They're good books.
Those were good
they
books.
were initially, but yeah.
I only read the first few of them a very long time ago. But isn't like a young
I think
boy...
I read them to you.
I think so, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like a young boy stumbles across like fairies and stuff, and he joins like the fairy police force almost. Isn't that kind of what happens? Yeah.
That's right, because they have like an interdiction force for wayward fairies because they have to keep control so they don't interact with the humans above and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, those were then definitely like very heavily Celtic influenced, I would say.
Oh yeah. I see some of the themes, this thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any other thoughts on this first section of Celtic myths?
No, it was great.
Yes.
They're longer stories than the previous chapter, but chock full of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Next episode, we will be looking at the Ulster Cycle, stories of Cuchulainn and the Red Guard. So that's something to look forward to for all our listeners.
Sounds good.
Yes. All right. Well, this has been Unlimited Opinions. And I've mentioned this earlier, but you can follow us on Twitter, capital U, lowercase LMTD, capital O, Opinions, for all the updates on when our episodes are live. I've been Adam Bishop.
I'm still Mark Bishop, and we're still waiting for somebody to win a free t-shirt.
That's right. There is still a competition. First person to tweet something at us, anything at us, you get a free t-shirt that we have not yet designed. But it is still...
And that t-shirt may or may not have the phrase, "Let's go Brandon" on it.
45 episodes in now and still not a single tweet. So it's fantastic.
So social media outreach is very impressive.
Yes, I mean, we're reaching billions at this point. All right, well, this has been Unlimited Opinions. So do you think somebody will eventually tweet at us?
Surprised one of your buddies hasn't.
That's true. I was absolutely expecting someone to when they first found out about all this, because they're like, "Oh, you have a podcast? Oh, that's, I'm gonna listen to that." Nobody ever does, but yeah.
No. Well, the subject is a little esoteric.
Yeah, philosophy and mythology.
Highbrow.
Not exactly. Yeah.
Highbrow stuff. The commoners don't like it.
Yeah, we're just so good.